One of the first warnings that sugar was the satanic sweetener came in a book over 50 years ago, John Yudkin's Pure, White, and Deadly. This week, a look at how the problem has become even worse. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 21, Chapter 5, Evil Sugar.
John Yudkin was a British physiologist who in the 1960s first started correlating our sugar intake as the primary driver of heart disease. In 1972, he published the aforementioned book, Pure, White, and Deadly. Subtitle, How Sugar is Killing Us and What We Can Do to Stop It. What followed was a massive discreditation campaign against Yudkin by a highly organized, well-funded pro-sugar lobby. More on that coming up. Actually, when you look at sugar's overall history, other than tasty, there's very little good to say about it. For centuries, our primary source of sugar was the sugar cane. Sugar cane is actually part of the grass family, botanically speaking, and grows in bamboo-like stalks up to 20 feet high.
B&H, pure cane sugar, growing in the sun, Irish sugar, growing pure, fresh and clean. B&H, pure cane sugar is the one.
What prompted primitive man to first suck on these things? Well, that's unclear. Maybe they were just trying to make a blowgun. And when they got it into their mouth, they went, delicious. Sugar cane originated in what we now call New Guinea, the southwestern Pacific, just north of Australia. Just veer left and look for the signs. Thousands of years ago, the natives would simply suck on the stalks to ingest the sweet juice. Dad, can I have another sugar cane? No, no more. You'll spoil your dinner. Sailors and explorers brought sugarcane to the main continent, and it was in India about 2,500 years ago that people began crystallizing it. They extracted the cane juice and then evaporated the liquid. The Indians used sugar as a medicine. It seemed to have that pick-me-up quality. Some considered it a spice, and they sprinkled it on meat and fish. It wasn't until sugar moved over to the Arab world that it began to be used in ways we would now more readily recognize. Baking, jams, jellies, sweet treats. The word candy comes from the Arabic word kandi, Q-A-N-D-I, which literally means made of sugar. Interesting, too, that the words syrup and soda also have Arabic roots. It was an ancient Arabian writer who first suggested the notion that at mealtime we eat all our savory foods first, saving the sweet items for the end. In other words, he invented dessert. Dessert was invented in the desert. You write that down, and spelling counts. Through wars, invasions, and general mucking about, sugar was introduced to Spain and Portugal, and soon after the rest of Europe. The Europeans loved sugar, more so than even the Arabs. They just couldn't get enough of that sucrose stuff. Big problem, though. The climate in most of Europe didn't allow for any thriving sugar plantations, so they had to import it. Also, extracting and crystallizing the cane juice was quite complicated and laborious. As a result, sugar was very expensive and almost exclusively a treat for the elite. You know what changed all that? Christopher Columbus. Sailing the ocean blue in 1492, funded partially by the King and Queen of Spain. As we know, Columbus never really discovered America. He landed somewhere in the Caribbean, Jamaica likely, but what he discovered was a climate that would be perfect for growing sugar cane. All Chris had to do was conquer and claim the land, introduce sugar cane, and that would be extremely lucrative for his financiers and for him. In 1493, Columbus brought sugarcane to the New World on his returning voyage, And it was his son, Diego, that set up the first sugarcane plantation in Jamaica shortly thereafter. It was sugarcane that fueled the European colonization of the Americas. Even more than silver and gold, sugar was known as white gold. Plantations sprang up everywhere, from Brazil up to Cuba. And of course, the European colonizers, as was their way, sought to maximize the profits from sugarcane by enslaving the conquered locals. And then, when operations became so large that they ran out of locals, they brought in slaves from Africa by the boatload. That's how it all started. And slavery and labor issues continue to plague the sugar industry to this day. Historical records show that the working conditions on those early plantations were untenable. Long, debilitating hours in the hot and humid climates. Rusted old machetes that required brute strength to bring down the tall 20-foot sugar canes. And they were forced to chop at such a rapid rate that human limbs often got in the way. The canes themselves had dangerous points that would often pierce the human flesh, and once chopped down, the canes don't last so long. So even after working from sunrise to sunset to chop them down, there was the backbreaking chore of hauling them all to the plant. The extracting presses in the refinery were these large wooden rollers, often crushing the arms and legs that got too close. Life expectancy of an enslaved sugarcane worker was estimated at 7 to 9 years after arrival at the plantation. The colonizers didn't care. Back home, sugar was profitable and plentiful. Europeans dumped it into their coffee, their tea, their chocolates, and cakes. The more they consumed, the more they wanted. The greater the demand, the greater the New World plantations. More sugar, more slaves. This would go on for decades. In the great cities of the world, millions enjoyed their sugary goodies, either blissfully unaware or willfully ignorant of the human cost. Eventually, though, people began to rumble about having to wait for the sugar ships to come in from the New World. And some troublemakers were starting to say out loud that maybe slavery wasn't such a good idea. One thing led to another, and they began to look for other sources for sugar. In the late 1700s, German scientists discovered, sugar beets, basically. Andreas Sigismund Marggraf first discovered that sugar could be extracted from the beet roots, and he proved it was chemically identical to cane sugar. Bingo! Because guess what? Sugar beets were much heartier. They did not need a tropical climate in order to flourish. They could grow the beets in Europe, all by themselves. Sugar beets became the first commercially successful alternative to the sugar cane. Today in North America, all the added sugar we consume is sourced almost equally between the beets and the cane. But let's not leave Germany just yet. Here is yet another evil chapter in sugar's history. Hitler was addicted to sugar. Does that explain a lot? I don't know. It's been chronicled, documented, and reported that he sometimes filled an entire cup with sugar, then added just enough tea to turn the whole thing into a thick brown gravy, which he guzzled down many times per day. And apparently he used this sauce to wash down several pastries and up to 2 pounds of chocolate per day. He was even said to have consumed cake during his final days in the bunker. In the early days of Nazism, Hitler invested heavily into the sugar beet industry, not only to please the farmers and also satisfy his own sweet tooth, but for something even more nefarious. So they're growing all these sugar beets for sugar. But when you extract sugar from the beet root, there are certain byproducts that remain. One of those is known as schlempa. It's a black residue that contains cyanide. The heating and processing of the schlempa produced cyanide, which was the main ingredient used by Hitler in the cyanide gases in the prison camps of the Holocaust. Millions died while Hitler had his cake and chocolates, all sourced from the same plant. The sugar industry was vital to the Nazi war machine. This brings us back to Professor John Yudkin and his book, Pure, White, and Deadly, How Sugar is Killing Us. So far, I've talked mostly about the toxicity of the sugar industry, but suddenly they had a scientist who was focusing on the molecules themselves. As I said earlier, Yudkin had been warning of sugar's dangers, the connections to heart disease, since the 60s, culminating in that book published in 1972. It's interesting that his findings at the time were largely dismissed, not taken seriously, and it's only been relatively recently that he has been lauded and hailed as a man ahead of his time. Yudkin passed in 1995, never really witnessed the impact of his research and work. Yudkin came up against the Sugar Research Foundation, a U.S. sugar industry group first founded in 1943, later changing its name to the Sugar Association. The Sugar Association paid scientists from such institutions as Harvard to write and publish articles refuting Yudkin's work. One such scientist was Dr. Mark Hegsted, a Harvard professor of nutrition, who later on went on to be the head of the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA. Remember USDA and FDA, the Food and Drug Administration? In the United States, they control most of the food decisions. Hegsted and others were paid about $50,000, half now and half when your article is published, to discount any findings that sugar was related to increased heart disease. They even had a cool name for the whole operation, Project 226. And in fact, Hegsted's findings in quotation marks, were published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. And this should start to sound familiar. These paid shills said, in fact, that dietary fat was the real culprit and not sugar. And remember, many of these guys went on to work for the government. It's something the lobby groups call agency capture. You place high-ranking food executives on the boards of the USDA and FDA, and then they make decisions based on the advantages to the food industry and not the health of citizens. And it's not just the states. At one point, Health Canada's Food Advisory Committee had at least half of its members from the food industry, or people invested in it. Now, it may sound logical at first. People involved in the food business should be the experts on our government food committees. You know, not if it's a guy from Kraft who's suddenly recommending a law that people eat more KD mac and cheese. Oh, and that one never really happened. I was just using it as an example, just saying, don't sue me. The sugar lobby in the States, though, ensured that they had their people on committees. The Sugar Association, the sugar lobby, succeeded in taking the health focus off of sugar and onto fat and cholesterol. We remember food companies began making low-fat products, promoting them as a healthy way to stay slim and attractive.
Now I can enjoy all the goodness of yogurt, but with only half the calories.
New Danone Diet Light. All the goodness of regular fruit yogurt with only half the calories. Light on fat, light on calories.
Right on taste.
This opened the door for the food industry to add even more sugar to these so-called low-fat foods. As a result, though, obesity rose a full 10 percentage points in the first decade. Since all this focus on fat and cholesterol began, obesity went from about 30% of the population to today, where about 3/4 of North Americans are considered overweight. And globally, the rate of people with diabetes has quadrupled over the last 4 decades. The sugar lobby is very powerful. You know, the number one single on the Billboard charts for 1969 was Sugar, Sugar by the Archies. Oh, not the Stones, not the Temptations, not even Tom Jones. It was Sugar, Sugar. I'm not saying the sugar lobby was responsible for that, but I've always had my suspicions. After all, sugar is a term of endearment. How can that be bad for you?
Take it from Carinkles. The best breakfast under the big top is post-sugar rice Carinkles. Each grain of rice in sugar rice Carinkles is carinkled with honey and sugar. No matter what other rice cereal you've ever tried, you'll love post-sugar rice Carinkles best of all. Honey and sugar make it different and wonderful. A circus of fun to eat Post-Sugar Rice Crinkles, the greatest cereal treat on earth.
Today, up to 70% of packaged grocery store items contain added sugar. And if you think you're going to get ahead of the game and read the food nutrition labels on each package, the industry currently has 262 different names for added sugar in everyday products. 262. And there are other sweeteners out there like stevia that are extracted from other plants other than beets or the cane. It's actually the stevia plant. But they haven't really taken hold. And also, no one is really sure if they, in fact, are any healthier. And it's still added sugar. For years, we've also had artificial sweeteners. Note that they are not even allowed to call themselves sugars, not even fake ones. But some have an aftertaste. Others are linked to miscellaneous ailments. You know, those pink and yellow packages on the diner counter just aren't as popular as those pure white and deadly ones. Sucrose, the sworn enemy. Our body naturally has glucose. Then there's fructose and lactose that occur in fruit and in milk. But sucrose is sugar. No other function. Refined, processed for our overconsumption. I'm no doctor, but our body has glucose. The sucrose we ingest can be converted to glucose and used when we need it for energy. When we eat too much sugar, it's converted to fat and stored in the liver for, emergencies. When the liver gets full, then the sugar is converted to fat and goes elsewhere on our body. If we ingested fat, our body can more readily process that than we can the refined sugar. You know, as big as the processed sugar industry is, some people have estimated that if you wiped it out entirely, a government could save all of that money and more in health costs. In Yudkin's book, he explained how sugar is killing us, but also how to stop it. How to stop it? Avoid added sugars. Cut out processed foods and encourage government regulation that ultimately speaks to our health benefits. 3 simple things, and the sugar lobby blocked him on all of those counts. They paid their anti-experts. They had government agency capture and massive marketing campaigns.
Imperial Pure Cane Sugar
Is quick dissolving.
for quick sweetening. Imperial Pure Cane Sugar.
Quick dissolving.
Coca-Cola even spent a lot of money on a large campaign to say that good health does not come from eliminating sugar, but from increasing exercise. And yes, exercise and even less fat are good things, but those ideas are meant for you to take your eyes off the real culprit, added sugar. The sugar lobby is more powerful than ever before and continues to spend millions on health reports, government policies, agricultural subsidies. They helped to repeal the soda tax. Remember that? A tax on sugary beverages? They turned it into a human rights thing. How dare they tax my super big gulp? I need 1.5 liters of Mountain Dew right now, and I ain't paying no tax on it. Meanwhile, still, in this 21st century, the sugarcane plantation business is shady. In the Caribbean and Latin America, workers complain of low wages and very poor working conditions. Similar situation in India, where those who actually protest or complain about the conditions can face severe fines and punishments just for speaking up. The industry stinks. The human cost of sugar is very high, and the health risks are numerous. Yet estimates say that an average North American consumes up to 70 pounds of added sugar per year. 70 pounds. That's like taking that bag of sugar you bought at the grocery store and pouring the entire thing straight down your gullet every 4 or 5 days. The sugar lobby is as bad or possibly worse than the tobacco lobby, the oil lobby, the coal lobby, diamond miners, coffee farmers, cocoa producers. Some of the questionable tactics used by the tobacco industry were actually borrowed from the sugar lobby, who did them first. We've managed to get away mostly from smoking and tobacco products. We got the unsafe cars off the streets. We're even trying to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. But sugar? It marches on, bigger than ever. And you know, with things like diamonds and coffee and now even chocolate, we're at least asking, Is this ethically sourced? Yeah, we don't always really care about that, and it's hard to actually know. But at least we're saying, is it ethically sourced? We don't ask that much about sugar. It's sugar. It's the worst. But we still just pick it up and suck it down. Centuries later, against all the evidence, we remain blissfully unaware or willfully ignorant.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk 37 at gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.